Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta is a prime example of a classic American road course. It sits in the Georgian red soil about an hour northeast of Atlanta, humble and quiet Brazelton. Tonight, however, the quiet is cut short by the thunderous roar of GT3 spec racing machines. For 60 minutes, the battle will rage around this 2.5-mile, 12-turn track for the first showing of Group 2 in the Washington, D.C. region SCCA Virtual Racing League. Kyle Heyer alongside Tom O'Gorman tonight for the second round of the 2021 D.C. Region Virtual Racing League season. And this time it's GT3 cars at Road Atlanta, a big step up from the cars we ran at Lime Rock a few weeks ago.
Well, we're lucky to get to see a lot of different formats here on SimTV, but this is one of the most unique. We're switching groups every other week. We have Group 1, which is Mustangs and Miatas racing in a multi-class series, much more similar to an SCCA club racing weekend. Then Group 2 is what we're watching here tonight, GT3 machines in longer 60-minute quote-unquote endurance races, and I love that we're going to get to watch the variety of cars with a lot of the same drivers in different championships, 3 in total. Obviously the Mustang Miatas share their own championships on track, but this one starts off this 3rd championship on the season.
Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta, just about 2.5 miles long, 12 corners, Tom. It all starts with a run down to turn number 1, a fast right-hander that takes you up the hill. Take me through that.
One of my top 5s in the U.S. for sure. It's a fast uphill right-hander at turn 1. Turn 2 is more of just the entry to turn 3. If you have to hop the curb into the S's, turn 4 sweeps you massively downhill before you hit the bottom of the S's. There's a couple corners there. We don't number them. Then we sweep uphill at turn 5. There's a short shoot down to turn 6, a decent passing opportunity, especially with mistakes there in turn 5. Lots of curbing on the exit before you slow the car down for turn 6. Banking, which we're watching on screen, and then into turn 7. Key most critical corner on the road course as you have to get onto that long back straight. 8 and 9, not a big deal before you get to the braking zone. The other great passing opportunity into 10A and 10B. The final switchbacks before you crest the hill at turn 11 and drop down over 10 stories into turn 12.
There's a look at that 10-story drop in that final corner. Qualifying already underway on the racetrack. There's over 40 cars here, Tom, and it's going to be really, really packed on the racing circuit. Nobody's put a lap time in yet, but it's busy out on track, and finding your own room to race is going to be a challenge, not only in qualifying, but for the 60-minute race.
Well, this is more of a storyline this week than is the case most of the times here in the virtual world in iRacing, because often you don't share the track in qualifying. You get 2 laps, 3 laps, maybe 4 if you're lucky, to yourself in your completely own isolated little bubble for qualifying. Here, though, we're doing it real-world style. Everybody has to share the track, and as you mentioned, 40-some cars. There's a lot of cars here for not a lot of road course, and I know there was a lot of discussion about etiquette for qualifying coming into this qualifying session, but realistically, you have to be just as good at finding your space on track as you do at driving the car to be able to deliver in this session.
A lot of familiar names that are up front with us tonight so far. Alex LaRose, your current provisional pole sitter with 1 lap down and complete. ALESSANDRINI runs 2nd, then Jack Chrissy, Paul Gibson, Matt Waldbaum making, I believe, his first start in the DC Region SCCA here tonight. Thomas LAYTON is back joining us. We've seen him in the past. Typically jumps on board with the faster and more complex racing machines versus the simpler Mustangs and Miatas we raced last week. But good to see Tom back. He's in this brand new BMW M4 GT3. This car hasn't raced in the real world yet, and it's kind of a wild one in iRacing here. Tom, tell me about it.
It is, and he actually drove the BMW GT4 in our previous season, so it's not a surprise to see him in it. But this car is certainly one of the new favorites. It's still a prototype here in iRacing. BMW allowed the service to scan it and get all of its specs before it has even turned competition in real life, but it's proven to be a favorite, mostly in that it's front engine, rear wheel drive, nice and stable. LAYTON's not necessarily proving that now, but it does inspire more confidence than most of the GT3 cars, which happen to be mid-engine and rear wheel drive. So those can be a little more lively, but the BMW is certainly kind of a nice, maybe a good entry point where the Mercedes used to be. We're going to see a lot of those BMWs tonight because they're also pretty fast in a straight line and a lot of power with the turbos in that car. But otherwise, if you see any other shape, it's probably going to be an Audi, a Lamborghini, or a McLaren, maybe the odd Ferrari. The Audi and Lamborghini are very similar underneath, and they drive very similarly. Then we have the turbo Lamborghini, tends to be a little faster in a straight line, a little more stable, but also a little pushier maybe. Then we have the McLaren, certainly the rowdy one. It's a super fast steering rack, super lively. There may be a Mercedes here or there, but that is Andrew PALLOTTA driving massively outdated, but still kept relatively up to spec. 4GT GT3, and that one is, I really don't know much about it other than it's not particularly popular, and Andrew PALLOTTA, who finished 2nd in the opening round in the Mustang, just wants to be different tonight, apparently.
It does look special, I'll tell you that. It sounds great, too. So we'll see if he can pilot it to a competitive showing. He runs 10th right now, so it's not treating him too badly.
No, not at all.
And a couple Ferraris up near the front as well, but not as many as I would have expected to see. Richard Spicer is the top-running Ferrari in 11th. But I'm seeing at the top of the board a lot of McLarens, which is interesting to me, Tom, because these cars tend to be pretty wild, especially when you start jumping curbs. They seem to be a little bit unstable once you get them kind of bouncing around. A little surprised that this is the car of choice, but they are rocket ships, and maybe that's why they're a popular choice tonight.
Yeah, I'm not super surprised to see them be popular because they are so fast in a straight line, and they definitely did also calm down just a little bit in the most recent months with certain updates to the game. They're much more drivable. They do have a super fast steering rack, and it makes them a little bit point and shooty. As you can see, not a lot of steering lock as Jack Chrissy jumping the curbs at turn 3, getting the car a little bit rowdy, but otherwise... Oh. No way, he saved that. No, it finally goes wrong. But either way, from turn 7 to turn 10, and then maybe even out of turn 10, maybe out of turn 3, the McLaren's just going to be really fast. It's one of the fastest accelerating cars. Doesn't have the best top end, but it gets there really fast, so who cares? And I think that's why it's so popular.
Paul Gibson in another one of those McLarens as well. Alex Rose is at the top of the board in the number 26 car. DJ Alessandrini joining us in the Audi. Now, to my understanding, and this is true as of a couple years ago, the Audi GT3 here in iRacing is the car that everything is based off of in terms of BOP performance. So this car at times has been the car to have. I don't know if that's true today. But Alessandrini is certainly going to be capable of piloting it to a pretty good result. And the car that you mentioned earlier that we're not going to see a lot of is the Mercedes-AMG GT3. Right now, the highest running driver in the AMG is Sam Scott in the number 98. This car seems to have an issue with downshifting, especially getting down into the lower gears. You have to wait really, really long to downshift or else it gets really unstable. So it doesn't seem to be the car that everyone wants to run, but there are a handful of them in the field. If
you're used to iRacing but maybe haven't been around recently, the BMW is essentially the new Mercedes. Everybody used to pick the Mercedes because it was the most comfortable to drive. Now the BMW is the most comfortable to drive. The Mercedes has gotten a little uncomfortable, I agree. I think one of the most fun parts to watch about GT3 racing is it is the most serviced class in the simulator, which means we have 7 cars to pick from. There is no other class in the game that has this many cars to pick from, and each car has its own strength and weakness. So in general, other than maybe the Ford and the Mercedes, I think any car can win tonight, and it's down to the driver.
This racetrack has a lot of top-end area, especially heading down into turn 10A and 10B, but I think the nimbleness that you need in some of the other parts of the racetrack is going to come in handy for those running maybe the less powerful cars. This is the corner that we're going to be keeping our eye on. It's the best passing opportunity around this racetrack into turn 10A, and these cars do have anti-lock brakes here, Tom, so you're going to be pounding on that pedal and hoping you get it slowed down by the time you get to this turn-in point. Because this is a crucial area where you can make a pass.
They do have ABS, but honestly, the key for speed is not using it. You have to be on the very fine line of not braking too hard that the car gets a little bit bound up, and that tends to be maybe the struggle with people getting up to speed in the GT3 cars is you tend to lean on the driver aids, you tend to think of them as a little bit easier to control, but in general, you do have a very high level of finesse involved in driving these cars, and that's really what makes them so much fun to watch, because the difference between a good driver and a great driver is actually very much exacerbated in this car. As you can see in the top grouping, there's over a second spread in the top 10 or top 13 or so, and that's uncommon for this group. A lot of times we see things a little closer than that, but these cars really reward the driving style that requires to drive them. As we watch Alessandrini still struggle to surpass Alex LaRose in qualifying. There's only 200ths between the two of them. It's really tight, but it's not often we get to say Alessandrini struggling to pass over somebody in qualifying.
Well, P2 struggling. I'll take that any day. However, for DJ Alessandrini, you know he's got his lizard brain going. He wants that pole position from Alex LaRose. It's 2.5 tenths back to Thomas Layton in 3rd, then Paul Darling 4th, Ken HOUSEAL 5th, then Chrissy, Kokar, and Paul Gibson, Matt Walbaum, and Burkhardt rounding out the rest of the top 10. Looking down a little bit deeper in the field, Elias Roman joins us again. There's a pretty-looking Mercedes. I love this livery. And did you see the new Formula One?
I did. They were joking that the AMG stickers are all over the back of it. He went one further and put Mercedes stickers all over the back of it, but it does look good. Elias tends to be really, really fast in the TCR machines and often is competitive in other categories, but it looks like, especially with his car choice, he might struggle a little bit tonight. But I did want to point out our winners from the race Group 1 series that we saw 2 weeks ago is Cameron Bidwell, who's here in a McLaren this week. He's currently 14th in the standings. There's a good look at his car. It's interesting because if you remember, that Lime Rock race was not predictable and not normal in any circumstance, but Cameron Bidwell came out on top in those in the Mustangs.
Yeah, and this is about as far as you can get from a Ford Mustang in this McLaren MP412C. So we'll see if Bidwell can repeat the magic that he had in group number 1, but right now currently running in 14th. Who was the Miata winner from there?
The Miata winner was JAMSON HUFFMAN, who's only a couple cars back, also crossing the start-finish line there in that white and black Audi R8. And this is, I can't remember if he's 14 or 15 or 16, but
13 and 14, or 14 and 15.
There's teammates, yes, exactly, running running this series. They're both in their mid-teens, and Jameson pulled off the win from, I think, 10th on the grid in the Miata class. And part of that is, if you haven't gone and watched it, it's worth going back and rewatching. It's here on the archives at SimTV. But we ran an odd layout at Lime Rock Park with Mustangs and Miatas on the same layout, and basically every contender that we would expect to be at the front got crashed out, taken out, spun out, any sort of thing that could have happened to them, it happened. Made the race super unpredictable, and we had a couple of winners that we didn't see coming, and it was a lot of fun to watch. So it was Cameron Bidwell and JAMSON HUFFMAN that each lead those championships coming into a couple weeks from now when we go back to Group 1.
3 minutes left here in qualifying. We thought coming into the qualifying tonight, Tom, that the racetrack was going to be very busy, and it is. It's not quite the chaos that maybe we expected, though. It seems like there's plenty of room out there on the racetrack, and it seems like everyone's giving each other a lot of room to race. So I am guesstimating that no one's really mad yet. They will be once the green flag drops and the traffic starts, but I feel like so far qualifying has been a little bit more calm, cool, and collected than I think we would have expected.
It is, and it's also pretty similar to practice. There's a lot of the same drivers in the top 10, so I agree there may be some driver here or there that had the lap interrupted or maybe is feeling a little frustrated, but in general I think things are sorting out about how we expected so far. The other thing that's exciting is we have a McLaren on pole provisionally right now, then an Audi, then a BMW before we get to our second McLaren, and then on down. But overall, for the most part, we're going to have a lot of different makes and models at the top, and we're going to have a lot of familiar faces at the top.
We have all of the makes and models represented in the top 15 right now, with PALLOTTA just hanging on to 15. There's Ken HOUSEAL in the Lamborghini Huracan GT3, the only one that's in the top 10. I'm a little surprised by this because this car has in the past been a pretty good all-arounder. And I'm a little bit surprised that everyone hasn't picked it, but it's so good at everything, but not the best at everything, that a lot of people are looking for maybe the best at one thing, and they're going to pick that car versus the kind of, it's fine Lamborghini, which is what it seems to be.
Yeah, I think if you look at the what do you call it, the GT3 MCU for like Marvel style, this track and this combo, certainly the McLaren is the one on paper that you want if you could narrow everything down to stats. But in general, I think all the cars can do really well. I am surprised that there aren't more Lamborghinis, but also a thing with HOUSEAL there in the 23 car. He's qualified 7th right now, and as of about 3 o'clock this afternoon, he hadn't decided what car he wants to drive. So he's here with, at best, 4 hours of practice if he's just lapped and lapped and lapped and lapped. But I know he hasn't done that because he's got a life too. So this is a driver that's going to be learning on the fly tonight a little bit, and I suspect will get better throughout the night, where other drivers who have practiced more might end up, starting the race capped out, and they might find their mirrors full of that bright blue Lamborghini.
Climbing up the hill, HOUSEAL, bit of a wiggle there at the exit at turn number 1. 50 seconds left here in qualifying to get your lap started. ALESSANDRINI is still on a mission to try to take Alex LaRose off the provisional pole, but he's been unable to do so far, and last time by was 8/10 off pace. But I think he might have been gearing up for a go-ahead lap here, and he might get one more. So we'll keep an eye on the 61 to see if he can take Alex LaRose off the top step here.
I think he is going to get there, so that'll be fun to watch his final lap. But look at how close things have become as we've compressed down. It's only, again, a 100th between the top two. We've got 200ths between Thomas LAYTON and Jack Chrissy in third and fourth. Lump Cameron Bidwell in there at an 18.5 as well, and then Paul Darling and Ken HOUSEAL both at 18.6. So I mentioned early on that things were a little more spread out than we'd expect. They are certainly compressing very quickly.
He timed that perfectly across the line. 1:18.388, a 10th off of his best. We'll follow him here on this final lap. Checkered flag is out, and DJ will get one more run here at the qualifying pole here. Up over the crest in turn 3, big jump, and missed it, and he's going to call it a day, I think.
Yep, I think he jumped it a little too hard, dirtied the lap, and called it. Andrew PALLOTTA I must say, I'm very impressed for him to keep this this Ford in the top. Where did he drop a little bit? Top 15
yep.
even. Again, this is a car. It was, I think, the first GT3 car introduced into the service, and it's kind of an obscure car. It's definitely not popular.
Actually, a little bit of a correction. It was, I believe it was the second GT3 car in the service. The first was actually the McLaren MP412C.
Okay.
However, the Ford didn't start life as a GT3. It actually started life as a GT2 spec car, which iRacing then added the GT3 physics set to. Now, the two cars are not identical in real life. They had some slight aero changes and modifications, but for all intents and purposes, it's a GT3 Ford GT as it ran in 2005 or 6 or whatever year that was.
Yes, and iRacing being a 17-year-old game and a 15-year-old car in the game, obviously they took some liberties back in the day, but they have maintained it to a point, and it's not completely out, obviously, as PALLOTTA is proving. It can be competitive in some capacity, but it is definitely outdated. So interesting to see him go with that route, especially knowing that this is a completely separate championship from the other championships. He started the Mustang Championship off so strong, but he's keeping it in the Ford family for the Blue Oval. Andrew PALLOTTA, who would have thought?
I guess some people are very brand heavy. I don't think that's necessarily the reason why he's doing that, but there's some people I know that would not be caught dead in a Chevy because they like their Ford products or vice versa. I mean, I guess I get that.
I wouldn't call Ken HOUSEAL out by name like that. No,
oh, man. All right, DC Region SCCA Virtual Racing League, 60 minutes about to kick off here from Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta. As checkered flag falls here on the qualifying session, Alex LaRose is your pole sitter here. In just a second, we'll take you down to the grid. We'll go over our keys to the race. And then we'll run through 60 minutes of action before we have another 2-week break until Group 1 returns. And that'll be a fun change back to the slower cars after everyone's had a little bit of downforce for the week. Let's head down to the racetrack here and go through our keys to the race here, Tom, and we're going to kick things off with multi-make. We've talked about a little bit the differences in the cars and how they race together. That's going to be something to keep our eye on today.
And it's always fun to watch with a 60-minute race, including a pit stop. The thing will ebb and flow. This race needs to breathe a little bit. Certain cars have different strengths and weaknesses, and you got to keep the car underneath you. But there's also a lot of cars out there.
Packed track. We saw it in qualifying. We're going to see it more in the race. We've got a bunch of rows of cars. We've got about 40 of them, so 20 rows, give or take. And it's going to be fine maybe after the field gets spread back out, but then traffic is going to be a big concern towards the end of the race. We'll keep our eye on that. Then in this race, 60 minutes means you got to hit the pits.
And not only practicing getting in and out of the pits, but being your own crew chief and being your own strategist. You have to nail not only the settings with your mouse and keyboard during the race, but you also have to be able to read the race and respond to what's happening around you. So there will be some strategy going on here. I think the pit window will be something like 15 minutes towards the middle of the race, as I suspect we're running about 70 to 75% fuel in these cars, meaning that it's basically a forced pit stop. There's no opportunity at all other than manipulating the race around you.
Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta, constructed in 1970. It's seen some changes since then. Huge drop on the backstretch called Gravity Cavity existed. That was eventually replaced due to safety concerns up at turn number 11. But that chicane down there at 10A, 10B didn't used to exist. And boy, it was a cool place. It still is, but I think it was a little cooler back in the day.
It is. Imagine, basically, you draw a straight line from the track back there at 10A. It actually went under that tunnel and then back up. So it was an even more massive elevation change, and cars used to get all sorts of light and then compressed and then light again. It was certainly a lot of fun to watch, and everybody who ever got to drive it up until I think 1997 or 1998 raved about it, but the rest of us get to wax poetic about it here in 2020.
Alex LaRose going to start on pole as we get the field rolling off here for our one pace lap. Let's have a look here at our starting lineup here, Tom. On row number 1, it's going to be Alex LaRose in that number 26. Chris Spiller will be on the outside in, nope, that was incorrect. We'll go off of yours. DJ ALESSANDRINI in the 61. Then Thomas Layton, Jack Chrissy, row number 2.
Cameron Bidwell jumps up to 5th late in qualifying. Then Paul Darling in 6th. The Quiet Force always also in a McLaren. Then Ken HOUSEAL in the first of our Lamborghini, 7th. Paul Gibson on the outside, and then another McLaren in 8th.
In 9th, it'll be Nikhil Kopker in the 9th position. Matt Waldbaum in 10th on the outside. Kyle Herbst, Morgan Burkhardt, row number 6.
Then it's Ryan Maloney. Watch this car. He appears to be in a Ferrari, I'm sorry, maybe our first Ferrari on the grid, alongside Andrew Kessel in 14th, then Andrew PALLOTTA in that Ford 15th, Richard Spicer, always fun to watch, in another Ferrari in 16th.
Peter Lausen and Will Robbins will share row number 9 in 17th and 18th. Sam Scott, Jamison Huffman, the Miata winner from round number 1 in Group 1, will roll off 20th.
Then it's Danny Gross, 21st, Chad Griffith on the outside in 22nd in another BMW. Francois Brou in 23rd in a Ferrari, and Kevin Zhu in a Lamborghini 24th.
Hendrik de Zwart will roll off in 26th. Dave Fitzgerald starts 27th. Behind them, Greg Obadia, Elias Roman in 28th and 29th.
Louis Alessi, another favorite in the field, 30th. Don Manning, 31st. Benson Tai, 32nd. Chris Spiller is 33rd on the grid.
Scott Kim starts 34th alongside Andrew Chow in 35th, and it's Cristobal Rodriguez in 36th alongside Chris Hebert in 37th.
Chris Hebert will roll off last car with a qualifying time. Doesn't look like he actually took the grid, so it might be 36 starters. A few cars dropped off, but the field screaming even at low speed up the back straightaway. Lots of different sounds, lots of different shapes. This will be good.
Here's a look at the weather information here, Tom. Nice and cool here in Braselton, Georgia today. We wouldn't have to worry a whole lot about tire wear potentially. It's going to be all about hitting the fuel window to make it to the end of this race. High humidity, though, as always, in the Atlanta area. And now heading down towards the chicane here, turns 10A and 10B. The best passing opportunity on the racetrack at lap number 1. I'm sure it will be potentially an accident zone as well. So make sure you keep the fenders on your car to last all 60 minutes. Be approximately 46 laps here. Thanks for joining us on Sim TV for the DC Region SCCA Virtual Racing League up over the crest at turn number 12. And now down the 10 stories to the front straightaway. LaRose alongside Alessandrini. Green flag flies, 60 minutes on the board.
Killer start for Alessandrini around the outside. He keeps it double file. Most of the field is still double file. In fact, Alessandrini might have a nose ahead of the McLaren on the inside. LaRose succumbs to the pressure a little bit, lets Alessandrini around the outside. He barely keeps it on the track in turn 1.
And he's going to have it. Alessandrini clears LaRose for the top spot here into turn number 3 behind them. Jack Christie filters into 3rd. Then it's a stack up into turn number 3. Everyone getting sorted out 3 wide into turn 3. And I think we've made it through so far so good. Tight quarters up there at the top of the hill.
Cool. Fantastic to see. This is an epic start. So we have Audi and then a trio of McLarens before the BMW. Thomas Layton, who dropped a couple of positions. Now one car is off of BMW.
It's Kyle Herbst. Another car turned around. That, I believe, is the number 10 car, Nikhil Kopar. He's gone around. Other than that, we made it through, so just 2 innocent spins so far. But Alessandrini, with an amazing start, grabs the top spot away from LaRose and leads the field down to the backstretch.
Well, and I suspect this is experience coming out because we know approximately where the green flag comes out in iRacing. It's always about the same time, and it's pretty early. And Alessandrini is one of the most experienced drivers in the field in the simulator, and he'll know that that green flag is going to come out relatively early. He timed it to perfection. I don't think he even jumped it. He just reacted to it perfectly. Alex LaRose, a little bit less experienced, certainly well practiced though, but got surprised a bit and was, I think, pretty smart to not push the issue too much down into turn 1.
Whoa, big dive up the inside by the 243 of Kevin Zhu. That was tight with a 30 of Hendrik de Zwart and made that stick. Behind them, Francois Brou gets filtered out. And other than 2 spins, we complete lap number 1. Nicely done by this field of 38 drivers.
Look at all these Ferraris battling with one BMW in the middle. Slots in as a sandwich before coming across the start-finish line.
It's Kyle Herbst. Remember, he was the driver that spun at the bottom of turn 5. So he's got a lot of work to do. Didn't pick up any damage on that car, but cold tires will get you, Tom, especially if you start hipping and hopping over those curbs there at the top of turn 3.
Yeah, it's impressive for him to recover to even still be in the battle of the field, really, but he does have a long way to go. 28th currently on the track out of 36 starters.
Morgan Burkhardt at the exit of turn 5 gets claimed by the curb, loops it, no damage, but a hard place to back up. He will finally get back rolling, but tumble to the bottom of the order. Ryan Maloney holding up a train here with Andrew Kessel in behind, and that nicely painted number 13 car. Great looking train here down the back straightaway, then climbing up to speeds well over 155 miles an hour. We'll see how fast we're going to get. 161 VMAX for Alessandrini in the 10A. Here comes Kessel.
Kessel looks to the inside of Maloney. He's going to go for it early on. The tires are fresh. He's feeling bold, but they're going to go side by side. It's going to hold the field up. They touch door handle to door handle. One of them goes around, and it's Kessel.
They're both going to spin. Going to be a massive crash here at the exit of turn number 10B. Maloney also involved. A couple other cars picked up some damage there, but
I think Spicer was involved. Sam Scott might have had some contact. Andrew PALLOTTA might have made it through without any contact. The hood on the Ferrari gone as he goes to the pit lane. Now PALLOTTA tries to take the position up at the front of this pack. This is about 15 cars in a battle.
Oh, a couple bumps and bangs exchanged there into turn number 1, but they kept it all straight. That was ragged through turn number 2, but they got it sorted out. And here comes the 243 of Kevin Zhu. We saw him making moves early. Came from 24th. He's made it up 4 spots now, side by side with FITZGERALD down the hill. You can't do that here, Tom. He just tried it. Ooh, big wiggle.
had a good start, up 4 positions, and every little position counts here. He's dropped off the back a little bit, just in front of BMW up the inside of the Ferrari for Greg Obadia protects on Will Robbins. Robbins still trying to show the nose, maybe rattle Obadia a little bit. But they're going to go side by side. Look at the rear wheel drive BMW get loose off of turn 7.
Behind them, it's Elias Roman in the 99, side by side with Kyle Herbst trying to recover from his spin on the opening lap. This is 2 German powerhouses door to door down the straightaway. Richard Spicer and PALLOTTA. Look at PALLOTTA up to 10th place, and behind them side by side into 10A. A little bit awkward there. Peter Lausen in the 56 giving up a spot to Chad Griffith.
That's a killer start for PALLOTTA, and actually he had lost the position to Richard Spicer back in turn 1, drafts up the back straight and takes it back, so he's keeping that Ford up in the top 10.
Whoa.
Side by side through turn 12. That also doesn't work, but somehow they make it work. Peter Lausen with the point over Danny Gross, and Henrik de Zwart in the BMW shows the nose at the inside, takes the point. Look at how awesome this racing is. Guys, we got 55 minutes left.
And here comes Gross up the inside. Couldn't quite grab it off of Peter Lausen into turn number 3. He slots back in line. Good at double file behind them. They've gotten it sorted. There's Obadia. And keeping an eye on the front runners, LaRose had pulled in within 0.2 of a second of Alessandrini, but was unable to get any closer on the remainder of the lap. So keeping our eye up front, though, I think that lead could change. One car way wide in the exit at turn 5. Don't want to hit the wall out there, Tom. They put it far enough away from the track, you shouldn't be out there.
This is definitely a track with high consequences. The moment you leave the surface, you're pretty much hitting something at some point. Just because it's kind of those old style racetracks with no paved runoff. A big spin for Dave Fitzgerald. Unfortunate to see as he had started so strong with a big battle on the first and second laps.
For the race lead, Alex LaRose pulls close to DJ, about a 10.5 in for third place. Jack Chrissy, Paul Darling, Thomas Late. Look at this down the hill for third.
Oh, that's a big move. Slams the door, does Paul Darling, up from 6th on the grid. He is on a charge in that 155 car. Looking back, spits flames back at Jack Chrissy, who gets a surprise from Thomas Layton, shows the nose at the inside. Not going to quite get it done, and that's going to mean that Paul Darling gets a clean getaway in turn 1.
That was a way deep dive for Layton. Almost made contact there, and at the back, Paul Gibson and Ken HOUSEAL watching from 7th and 8th as we come down the hill. Hard to spot your apexes here when you're following cars. I mean, you're sitting so low, especially in the McLaren. You're sitting so close, so low to the ground and so forward that it's hard to see where you're going.
Seeing a lot of these PG, I'm trying to see if it says PGG or PG3.
PG3.
PG13. I'm not sure. There's a handful of them in the field, including Alex LaRose, Cameron Bidwell, Paul Gibson, and one of the cars that had the incident in the opening lap. So we have some teamwork going on as well. Any of those cars with that design, you can guarantee they are working together in some capacity, but at the end of the race, they're going to want to race each other too. Paul Gibson racing now, though, shows the nose at the inside of Cameron Bidwell. And you got to be careful not to lose spots there. He lifts to make sure that they're not going to go side by side and lose touch with the battle for third. That
was a smart move there to lift out. This is a 60-minute race. We're only 7 minutes into it, so there's really no reason to run side by side when you don't have to. I think everyone's pretty much on the same page in terms of pace at this particular point in the field, so no need to rush that. Here is Will Robbins and Elias Roman. He pops out of line for 21st. On the brakes, this is where this Mercedes, whoa, look at Nikhil Kopar coming back from his incident early. Roman trying to muscle this Mercedes forward as Nick Babbitt goes around in 10A. Some damage to the rear, he might have gotten some help there.
Pretty well out by himself. This would have been from a long way. He got really railed there. Yeah. Coming into 10A, BMW behind just completely missing the braking zone, and unfortunately the 7 car will end up in the concrete back in pit lane.
Well, Cameron Bidwell is off. That's at the exit of turn 5. Don't see a lot of damage on this car. Let's go back and see how he got himself into this spot. Probably just a little bit too much curbing on driver's left. Oh, it was already loose. Wow, he gathered that thing up. That was amazing. He still caught the wall, but did a heck of a job to save that car.
Certainly minimized it. You mentioned it in the opening that the McLaren tends to be not the most compliant and tends to be the most knife edge of all these cars. So the margin for error is even smaller when you're driving one of these, and Cameron Bidwell gets bit by that. He's still in the top 10, although he'll have to suffer with that damage. Slow straight line speeds for the rest of the race. Maybe he even hits pit lane.
And Andrew PALLOTTA now has a Ferrari chasing him down. Ford versus Ferrari Part 2 as we head down the hill towards 10A. On board with the Ford GT into turns 10A and 10B. Richard Spicer in trail. So after a couple laps of all-out intensity, things have sort of settled for now. There are still some scattered battles around the racetrack like Will Robbins. Oh, there's a huge crash on the front straightaway. Obadia slams the concrete. That car is destroyed. Wow. He must have gotten loose at the very last bit of the curbing at the exit of 12.
Perhaps too much inside curbing? No, just runs off the outside, overcorrects.
Yep. Oh, wow. That car
I should say undercorrects.
Holy cow. Who was that just squeezed on by? Wow, was that the 243 of Kevin Zhu? It must have been. He went off in turn number 1 after it. Here's his view of all this.
He might not have been able to believe that he dodged the previous incident and didn't get focused enough. Watch this. The Ferrari's going to bounce back across his nose.
Whoa. Oh, man.
And unfortunately, Zhu still ends up off the track at turn 1. So he'll drop a couple positions back to 25th.
Will Robbins a little slow at the exit of 7. So there's a little bit of damage on the nose of that car, so he must have had a run in at one point or another. At least I think. I can't tell if that car is destroyed or if that's how it's intended to look.
Yeah.
Wouldn't question the BMW designers at this point, but
no, there's definitely some damage. I'm trying to remember, he was up the field just a little bit, maybe battling with Jamison Huffman and Henrik de Zwart, maybe for 15th, so perhaps an incident for Will Robbins that dropped him back. You can see he's certainly lost position since the start, but I know he was battling much further up the field.
It was at least a couple laps ago. Last time by was relatively on pace. Make that 4th place is Jack Chrissy and Thomas Layton. We saw Layton try to grab this spot a couple laps ago in turn 1. Now just starting to mount a recharge back to the McLaren with the number 6.
You saw on the trackside camera just how much bigger the BMW is, and it does drive pretty big. It doesn't necessarily drive super heavy, but it just drives big. And this is a car that it is relatively consistent, so I think if Thomas Layton could just stay there, he's pretty good. The unfortunate thing is he's battling the only car that tends to be a little faster in a straight line, and it's the McLaren. How good it is in the straights and the braking zone. It's going to be hard to get by Jack Chrissy there in the 6th car. Paul Darling has continued to just pull away from these two once he's charged up from 6th. He sits there in 3rd and is gone out of frame.
Dave Fitzgerald going by Cristobal Rodriguez in the 36th. That's all the way back for 26th position. Still some battles happening back here. Here's Andrew Kessel and Ryan Maloney. These two had a run in earlier. Now they ran the exact same last lap. So these guys can't get away from each other, not only on the racetrack, but on the clock.
They're the two that came together coming off a 10B maybe 5 minutes ago, and they're going to have to maybe work together a little bit to charge back through the field. But I think if you're in this position, pit as early as you can, get the pit stop out of your way, and just try to put your head down and get in the rhythm for the last bit of the race. And I'm pretty sure the pit window should open up in about 10 minutes, maybe with 35 minutes remaining in the race. You can see in the upper left, we got 48 minutes to go, so they got to go a little bit longer on this fuel stop before coming down for the top off.
Here's on board with Jamison Huffman chasing Danny Gross. Watch these cars move around on the curbing, Tom. Out of control, but that's got to be so much fun when you get up over the curb and you're kind of bouncing around trying to wrestle the car into submission, and Huffman on a charge here to try to grab 14th away.
It's even more uncomfortable in real life when you got to deal with the bumps and bounces underneath you, but Jamison Huffman's doing it again. He came from 10th to 1st on the grid last week in the Miatas. This week up 5 positions, 20th to 15th. Certainly doing a good job and basically battling mano-a-mano with Danny Gross, both in Audi R8s. They're kind of working together right now in that draft, but they've lost touch with the rest of the field up in front. So if Huffman's going to go for the pass, he needs to make it quick. The car looks clean.
It does look clean, not a scratch on it so far. 47 minutes to go, about almost a quarter of the way into this race. Francois Brou in the 69 and Morgan Burkhardt also battling for 22nd, but the closest battle continues to be between these two for 14th place. And up front, ALESSANDRINI continues to lead Alex LaRose, but it is not a blowout. LaRose is still keeping him honest here, about a half a second back. That gap has come down to at least 0.2 of a second up about a lap ago. But LaRose is strongest heading into turn 10A, and then he loses it in the first sector mistake.
I was just going to say, all Alex needs to do is camp here until the Audi gets a little bit hairy, because the Audi will lose the tires and lose the drivability just a little bit more than the McLaren, and it does happen to one of the most experienced drivers on the grid. Watch this. He comes through turn 3, gets a little bit deep into turn 7, and just loses the front end a little bit, tries to get on power. The car will not turn, and he knows to salvage it by lifting off the throttle, but a change for the lead. Alex LaRose to the top.
Not done yet, though. 3/10 separating them, and ALESSANDRINI is entering the part of the racetrack where he is the best. So fast down there through turn 12, absolutely full throttle. entering turn 1. This is where this Audi is so good, is this uphill and then the downhill section over through turn 5.
Be a little more compliant over the curves as well. You hear him check off the throttle before the car lands and then commit, but that Audi, it's looking pretty hairy. And I know from talking to drivers that drove the Bathurst 12 hours last week, both the Audi and the Lamborghini, once the tires started to fall off, if your setup wasn't just right, it became a total nightmare. And I didn't hear that about the McLaren so much. So the fact that DJ's car is already showing signs of wear. Meanwhile, Jack Chrissy from fourth.
Fourth place car crashed hard at the exit of turn 5, and I think that will be damage that will make him pit. Was way off, just missed it, lost the nose, got up on the curbing, and this, once you get out of rhythm there in the S's, it just throws you off, and hard overcorrection straight into the tire barrier. That's a big one there.
That's the second McLaren we've seen have that problem in that spot. It looks like if you touch the right side curb on the entry to turn 5, it really upsets the car. The last driver we saw have that issue salvaged it a little bit more gracefully than Jack Chrissy, but I think that's basically a spin of the wheel, whether or not you're in the wall backwards, forwards, how hard it is.
Well, looking at turn 5 here, if you're going to crash, there's a whole bunch of runoff area over here. If you get to this point and then you crash, then you're in the fence, then it's going to hurt. So if you're going to crash, do what the other driver did before and crash in the place that's designed for you to crash.
You telling him to crash better?
Yeah, hey, crashing is a skill. And we talk about that a lot on the oval side. Sometimes you just got to know when you're crashed and just accept it. If you keep trying to save it, you're going to get yourself in an even worse spot, and I think that's what happened to Chrissy there. For the lead, though, Alessandrini making a show out of it. He's getting a little behind the wheel here, watching the flames shoot out the back of LaRose's car.
Well, he had a lap and a half maybe of the rhythm got thrown off, and the car looked a little bit hairy, but he's recovered and now is certainly on the attack. But look at the speed the McLaren carries down from turn 5 to turn 6. He pulled out 3 car lengths before Alessandrini finally starts to show back up to the back bumper of the McLaren. We're going to get a little bit of a grill on the grill from the flames on the back of that McLaren down into turn 7. But this is going to be a lot of fun to watch. Again, back to our keys to the race. Multi-make, these cars will ebb and flow for the entirety of this race with their different strengths and weaknesses.
Just get a BMW up here and melt it into something that looks acceptable. Off the tailpipes of McLaren. Down the inside, Alessandrini laid on the brakes into 10A, but he's through. What a pass. That's hard.
And, well, Alex made it easy for him, really. You saw him delay the turn in, know that he might have lost the position for now, but he's got 44 minutes to get it back. And honestly, I don't hate being in second, just saving some fuel, honestly, because if you can save some fuel, that's part of where the strategy comes in. For a 60-minute race, you sit still less on the pit lane and you come out ahead. It's a lot easier than on track.
That's for sure. Here's Kyle Herbst and Danny Gross for 12th spot. Jamison Huffman still behind in 14th place. And Herbst a little bit wide. It's going to give Gross a really good run coming up over the crest. But you can go side by side through 12. It's not a recommended maneuver, and I think Gross is going to wait for a little better opportunity, like right here. Backs out, though.
Wow. I'm surprised he backed out, honestly, but that's front engine versus mid engine for you. The Audi was so strong off of turn 10A and B, but then has to think better of it. Kyle Herbst, how about that climb, though? That's the car we saw off on the first lap. He's basically back to where he started from last on the track. So he's actually run down Danny Gross and Jamison Huffman, the 2 Audis behind, past them both, and I suspect will drive back ahead.
That's going to hurt if he doesn't gather it up. He does. That was amazing. I can't believe he saved that car. It's right on board with him here down the hill. Just gets behind again. These cars can be so twitchy here, Tom, and this is such a, if you just miss it right here, gets the curb, gets this other one, that was just too much.
Wow, yeah, a ton of curve on the right side. That is not a friendly place for any of these cars. Kyle Herbst might have saw it coming and panicked a bit, ran wide. Gross certainly with a cut penalty, but bled it off now and didn't actually lose any spots.
Chris Spiller, Andrew Chow fighting for position back here for 27th. Wanted to keep our eye on Elias Roman in this number 99. He started this race all the way back in 29th. He's up to 16th organically. And only a couple of drivers have had issues. He's made excellent progress so far in this Mercedes. Don't believe, is he the highest running one? He must be. Yeah, no, he's not. It's Sam Scott up in 9th is the highest running. And he's actually about to run down Andrew PALLOTTA, who is keeping this Ford moving forward. Excellent progress here.
Talk about an unlikely pair, and the next cars in front of them are way up the road. They're well behind.
Well, this one isn't. Matt Waldbaum was about 5 or 6, actually make that 15 seconds up the road from Andrew PALLOTTA, and he's now going to lose that position. A similar story here in turn 5 is what I'm going to bet. Does he just miss the turn in here a little bit? Gets loose.
Uses the back end on entry. That's unfortunate. He didn't hit anything, so he'll be okay. But he was kind of within touch of Ken HOUSEAL and Paul Gibson So that's unfortunate, but those two drivers now are well within their own battle. And that promotes Andrew PALLOTTA in the Ford and Sam Scott in the Mercedes, the two least popular cars, all the way up into 7th and 8th.
Well, I'm already trying to promote his progress back forward. Gets side by side with Griffith here down the hill into 10A. On the brakes a little later. And tucks it in, gets himself back inside the top 10. There's Gross and Huffman. Here, Huffman with a big lunge up the inside, and he will take that spot away. Opportunistic move, and completes it. Up front, half a second lead between the two front runners, but Paul Gibson and HOUSEAL, you just mentioned them a moment ago. HOUSEAL, big slide over the curbing. Gather it back up. He does.
Remember, he hadn't really decided what car he wanted to drive, so he's probably still in the learning process for how to drive this car consistently fast, and he's clinging onto the back of Paul Gibson, and he's doing a really, really good job up a couple of spots as well, or at least one spot there. But a little chink in the armor there through the S's before coming onto the back straightaway. He's still within drafting distance, but these two have definitely lost touch with Thomas LAYTON, who's up the road a bit.
There's a look at Layton's advantage here as we come down the hill again, past the old gravity cavity. What a cool name for a racetrack part. I wish that still stuck around just as an alternate layout. That'd be cool. That would be really cool. LaRose right back on the tailpipes of Alessandrini, who was really close to the edge of the track in turn number 1. A lot of the crashes that you find at Road Atlanta are just from getting out wide and just nipping the grass on the edges of this place. It can bite you because you're carrying a lot of speed right up to the edge of the racetrack, and Alessandrini almost touched it on the entrance of turn 1.
It's actually LaRose made a big mistake in turn 3. Look at how far he's dropped off the back. He completely missed the entry to turn 3 and almost went off the track on exit. But up until that point, I was going to say that Alessandrini looks a lot more ragged than LaRose does. I think LaRose is probably the faster car, but maybe a little bit more conservative right now in this stage of the race at least. Alessandrini's, as expected, completely on the edge, pushing every single lap, but the fact that Alex is not able to work, or not having to work as hard and able to keep in touch, I think if he can execute a good pit stop, not take too much fuel, and then maintain his pace, he'll be okay.
Slow, lazy spin for Burkhardt. Brian Maloney was passing him, and he's got himself in a bit of a tight spot here. Trying to get back going the right direction, and he will. He'll drop a couple spots down to 27th. And goes a lap down as the leaders come through.
So in the top 6, we have everybody that started in the top 10, but then Andrew PALLOTTA from 15th, Sam Scott from 19th, Richard Spicer from 16th. A little bit further back, Chad Griffith is from 22nd up to 11th. There's a number of drivers that are just having massive drives right now, and it's super impressive to see all those cars in the top 10 from so far back on the grid, and this is one of the coolest battles, I think.
Andrew PALLOTTA making the old Ford workhorse do its job. Sam Scott chasing him down in the German muscle car. And Richard Spicer in a finely tuned Italian racehorse behind him in 9th. 3 very different cars.
We haven't made very nice words of the Ford particularly because it is certainly outdated, but I think the biggest thing with this car is its overall abilities are relatively strong. It's just that some of its parts are lesser than what they should be, and it drives a little bizarrely. It doesn't have the best feel, and I think the newer cars in the game, yes, they're more current, but with that also comes the most current modeling and the best feel. So even the Audi that came out a couple of years ago versus the Lamborghini that came out this year, they're fundamentally the same, but the Lamborghini just feels a little bit better because it's newer. The Ford, being as old as it is just kind of harder to feel and feels a little weird to drive. But it is certainly competitive, and Andrew PALLOTTA is making that a point for sure right now. It's probably just taken him a lot more practice to feel it.
Yeah, that Ford, you know, it's strong in a lot of areas, as you mentioned, but what it really lacks is compliance, especially over bumps in the racetrack. I'm not even talking about curbs. I'm just talking about bumps in the racing surface. It is undrivable at certain circuits, but other places it's not so bad. Road Atlanta is a little bumpy. There's some, whoa, there's a car off. That's the 36 car of Cristobal Rodriguez, and the 2 leaders will squeeze by. LaRose was within a 10th of Alessandrini, and again loses coming down the hill.
Something we didn't talk about much is traffic. With how many cars there are, with the spread of pace on this field, I'm not surprised that we're encountering traffic even before the halfway mark. The leaders make it through, and it'll be relatively sparse, but every single lapped car is certainly a wild card. Now Paul Darling is dealing with that lapped Lamborghini just behind, coming off of turn 7. And I don't think he made it just yet. No, he did not. Oh, yes, he does. He's the orange McLaren just there.
There's Dave Fitzgerald, I believe Andrew Chow, yes, working their way by. Then LaRose within 3/10 of Alessandrini in the braking zone. Do you have to be alongside into 10A, or do you think you can make those lunges stick? Because LaRose keeps getting close, but not enough to get alongside Alessandrini. And push come to shove at the end of the race. If you got to make a move, you got to make a move, right?
You don't have to be alongside, but check this out. Alessandrini just dove to the pits, 36 minutes, in fact. He was seeing the lap traffic coming and decided, nah, I'm out. I don't want to deal with this. So he's going to top that Audi off and will run to the end. No tires, just fuel. And Alex LaRose stays out and inherits the lead based on that. But LaRose could come to the pit lane at any moment now. I was going to say I like LaRose just kind of camping there, to be honest, but now he's got to turn it into qualifying mode and rip out some laps.
Ken HOUSEAL chasing Paul Gibson down through the S's. Heavy lap traffic here for them. Turn 5 is a little bit scary. Oh, big slide by Rodriguez. He gathers it back up. Paul Gibson and HOUSEAL drive by on driver's left.
Going to lose a little bit of time, and this is the exact reason Alessandrini just pit. He does not want to deal with these lap cars being, even if they're relatively paying attention and quick to pass, you still lose time. And the rest of the field's going to have to navigate that. He is going to pit out somewhere in about 15th position, so he's going to be dealing with not so much lap traffic as he is maybe a little bit slower traffic, but the guys in 10th are a little more predictable than the guys in 31st.
HOUSEAL right with Paul Gibson. Is there any push for HOUSEAL to pass Paul Gibson, or is there any incentive to work together, or is that sort of out the window at this point? Is the field mixed up enough?
No, I think so. I think it's time to go. If you're Ken HOUSEAL and you get the opportunity, you can actually still see through the windshield. He's going to get that opportunity. Up the inside, they're going to go side by side through turn 12, and just up the road, the black BMW is Thomas LAYTON. That is third place on the track. HOUSEAL can't make it work, but if he did, he'd be able to set his sights on that BMW and maybe start to make some progress, but he's going to be stuck in 5th for another lap at least.
Alessandrini, the only one of the top 15 to have made a pit stop so far. From 20th on back, almost everyone has, save for Don Manning and Andrew Chow. So a pretty interesting split. No one else has followed Alessandrini's lead here. PALLOTTA and Scott battling for what is now 6th position. Really impressed with PALLOTTA taking this forward. I mean, it tells you that he's the only driver out here in this Ford. There is 38 people here, so nobody else thought this would be a good idea, and PALLOTTA's making it work. So I'm impressed by that run. And Sam Scott also in the Mercedes, which is a car that probably isn't the best right now, also doing a really good job hanging on to a car that might be suboptimal today.
Their relatively peaceful battle is becoming more interesting, though, because Richard Spicer and Matt Waldbaum have both joined it just behind this Mercedes. Spicer in the Ferrari and Waldbaum coming back in the Audi, who had that spin earlier on. He's probably the fastest car of this quadruplet right here coming onto the back straightaway. So watch for him to maybe rain on PALLOTTA's parade a bit if he can get that Audi up towards the Ford. I bet the Audi's the quick car right here.
Working our way towards the halfway point, another 2 laps and we'll be there. Waldbaum closes in on Spicer in the braking zone. And Sam Scott tries to keep the pressure on PALLOTTA. These 2 cars are fairly equal. HOUSEAL right on the back tailpipes of Paul Gibson again.
I think he wants by. He's starting to figure out exactly what the car wants. And halfway through this race, lap traffic letting them through. But I really think HOUSEAL is going to take the position as soon as he possibly can. But look at the McLaren's just so good down certain sections of this track. Pulls out a couple of car lengths through the S's and will also pull out more from turn 5 to turn 6. I suspect it might be in the slower corners that the Lamborghini is a little bit quicker, and that might actually be down to the finesse that HOUSEAL has.
Through turn 7 onto this back straightaway, such an important corner. If you make a mistake there, you could throw away every bit of time that you gained on the rest of the lap. This straightaway is one of the longest in the United States when it comes to back straightaways. I think Road America might rival this, but it's a long one, and it counts how you get off of turn number 7. And then it carries you downhill a little bit, so you get a little assist from gravity too.
Super long and also off of one of the slowest corners in any North American motorsports circuit. So that's kind of a deadly combo for needing to nail turn 7. It's painful when you have a predictive timer in your car to watch it tumble if you mess up.
Or if you had a draft on one lap and then you're not drafted the next. You can just watch all the time you gain in the first sector go completely away. Matt Waldbaum got by Richard Spicer in 10A, move him back to 8th. And Jamison Huffman and Danny Gross still running nose to tail here into the chicane.
I'm Danny Gross. I'm looking to pit right now because if I feel stuck behind Jamison Huffman, this is the best opportunity to get away. He doesn't. We're well within the pit window. We know because Alessandrini has already pit and opened the can of those worms, but these drivers still running nose to tail. Richard Spicer is basically our second guy in the top 20 to take to that pit lane to fuel up the Ferrari.
So keeping an eye on DJ Alessandrini's pace. He lost to 10. Oop, the car around. Who was that? Was that, looked like it was Waldbaum, but it's not.
Huh, might have been disorder.
Maybe. I didn't see a car. Oh, Scott Kim in this yellow BMW down in 33rd. Kim started this race in 34th. Been a bit of a struggle today for Scott. Let's have a look at how he found himself here. Gotta go back a little farther. I'll bet you grabs the grass on driver's left. Not quite.
Oh, I think he was trying to let the other Audis through and just lost it on the grass. And this is the risk you take when you're Alessandrini. He's one of the front running cars, but now he's kind of mired into the top 15 traffic. And when little mistakes like that happen, it's essentially like dealing with lap traffic. And Alessandrini knows he's essentially in the lead of this race, but everybody around him doesn't care because they're racing for positions. So he lost a couple of tenths in that exchange just in being careful in turn one, but now can set his sights onto the battle between the Audis of Huffman and Gross.
Great battle going on for 10th position here. And I'm keeping an eye on the lap times that DJ's putting down. They are not faster than the race leader. There was someone stopped at the top of the hill there. Cristobal Rodriguez, that's a bad spot to be in the middle of the racetrack. He's going to wait for a clear opportunity to do so, but it's going to be difficult. There he'll get back on course. Problem is that DJ might catch these two before they hit pit lane, and that will be an even bigger loss to the time.
Certainly, because right now LaRose is kind of running in open air. Alessandrini took the gamble of pitting when he did. I don't think it was a bad choice, but it's just not panning out for him right now, and he's definitely going to have to deal with these two as traffic for at least a lap, but they could have up to at least another 5 laps in them before they have to pit.
Last time by, Alessandrini was a full second almost slower than race leader Alex LaRose. So in my mind, if Alex LaRose pits and gets right back out on the racetrack, he should come out in front of Alessandrini, given that they were only separated by a couple tenths of a second prior to that. So I think LaRose has positioned himself in a nice spot to pull an overcut here, potentially. See if the math pans out the way I think it will in my head. Here's HOUSEAL, big jump over the turn 3 curb. Still in trail of this number 9 who has been awful. What's the word I'm looking for? Persistent.
Not just awful.
No, not awful. Awful stubborn is the word I was looking for. He's actually doing quite good. He's inside the top 5. Definitely not awful.
No, he's
awful stubborn.
He's fended off any attack that HOUSEAL's been able to pull on it, but in general, he's not even allowed HOUSEAL to make an attack. He's just very, very consistent there in that McLaren with the white on the nose, orange on the back. I do think they're still losing time to Thomas LAYTON, who's in the BMW up the road a bit. So there goes Darling. That is LAYTON. And then a couple of seconds back to GIBSON, HOUSEAL. They're running in formation, but those are essentially, I think when the pit stops cycle out, they're going to be 3rd through 6th.
Gross gives up a position to Alessandrini. Then it's Jameson Huffman, the next driver on the chopping block. Keep an eye on those. Here is Andrew PALLOTTA on a lap car. I believe that's the 243 at Kevin Zhu, and indeed it is. Here's Scott and Waldbaum for 7th in the backdrop.
Thought Zhu wasn't going to make it easy, but finally does in the end of the braking zone. He's going to hold up Sam Scott for a moment. Scott's not liking that, but they finally get through. Waldbaum has a bit of a run down the straightaway.
Had to take a shallow line into 12 because that car is outside. And was not able to close up as much as I thought with that scenario, but he still remains about 2 tenths back from that yellow Mercedes.
Surprised he didn't lose more time to PALLOTTA, actually. PALLOTTA's still well within touch of these 3, so this is still a 3-car battle for 6th.
Oh, Scott a little bit wide at the exit at turn 3, and this Mercedes down the hill is pretty good. It's actually not as much of a straightaway car as you'd expect. It's a bit more nimble than one would think, but a little wide at the exit of 5, and here comes Waldbaum driver's left. Should be able to make this pass now with this run.
It's way too much curve on the inside for the Mercedes, and Waldbaum easily takes the position just on momentum. And now can set his sight on Andrew PALLOTTA, but Alessandrini is still stuck behind Jameson Huffman, who's not making it easy. Now Alessandrini's going to show the nose and probably take this position pretty comfortably up the inside of turn 6, uses the banking and shuts the door.
So he's back through some of the traffic that we thought was going to hold him up. And again, another 0.6 slower than LaRose last time by. So when these pit stops cycle out, I would expect LaRose to be leading this race by about a half a second to a second. You got a confused look on your face, like I don't know what I'm talking about. So what's going on?
I'm just looking at the time that Alessandrini was on pit lane, 41 seconds. His margin to the leader is only 38 seconds right now. So if the same margin exists for Alex LaRose, meaning if the same amount of time stopped on pit lane exists for Alex LaRose, then Alessandrini's in trouble. But I think the McLaren's pretty good on fuel. No, actually, the McLaren's not good on fuel. I know that. My
one adjustment maybe to that is that 41 seconds is the difference from pit in to pit out, from the cone to the cone. Doesn't include the little access road, which will cost you maybe a second and a half. So that might make this a little closer. And then the pit out road as well might be another half second worth.
It would make it worse, wouldn't it?
For LaRose,
yes. Yes. So I think Alessandrini has currently got the job done and will come back out ahead of LaRose, which he was leading before the pit stops, but I think he's actually pulled out a couple of seconds more.
We'll see where it all cycles in a couple laps. I think pit window is going to close here within the next 2 or 3 at most. Jamison Huffman and Danny Gross go right back to fighting as they were before DJ came through. This is now for 11th. 20 laps to go here. LaRose leads the way. Running pretty, he just ran his best lap of the race though, 1:18.939. So if he doesn't get it done, nothing was going to. This is on pace about as much as he's going to get. This car burning off the fuel, it's going to get a little faster as the night goes on here.
Well, that's one of the great parts about running the car all the way until it's out of fuel is the car gets faster and faster as it gets lighter and lighter. So the tires aren't necessarily as fresh, but it doesn't matter because the car is super fast. Jamison Huffman hits pit lane, but right now Alex LaRose is essentially using the car in its fastest time of the race as long as possible before pitting, and then it will still only have a certain amount of fuel in it, so it'll stay fast. Alessandrini went from full fuel back to full fuel, so his car will be a little bit slower. I don't know that it's hurting him as much, but currently LaRose is definitely quicker as he's pulled out another 0.4 of a second since we last checked in.
On the brakes into 10A, flames shooting out the tailpipes. Climbing the hill, there's Cristobal Rodriguez off again. He's been having trouble with that. Rose skips by pit lane once more. Still, the top 9 have not come to pit lane. Neither has 11th through 15th.
I think a lot of our top running cars that have pit, even Cameron Bidwell, Jack Chrissy, Ryan Maloney, Kyle Herbst, most of those cars pit for incidents and body damage, I think, more so than they did for pit service. So some of them may actually end up coming down pit lane again.
It's Elias Roman. Great charge from the back of the pack earlier today, started at 29th. And now runs right behind Francois Brou here in the 69 Ferrari. Should get a nice slipstream here on the backstretch. Not sure he'll be close enough to make a pass, but he's certainly going to give it a try here.
These guys both up from 23rd and 29th respectively on the grid, battling for 14th and 15th. So a couple of drivers having a good day regardless of how this battle turns out for the two of them, as long as they both stay on track. Listen to him trying to manage the power, getting out of turn 10B, and the Ferrari leaves him for dead just a little bit, maybe 2 car lengths on the exit.
One of the things the Mercedes has always been pretty good at is being just a stable, compliant platform. You can really attack racetracks in this car and feel confident about it, and Elias seems to be trying to exploit that. The Ferrari has been, in the past, has been a little bit more of a crystal ball of what it's going to do, especially in high-speed corners with the rear end. It can step out and kill you in an instant. So that car can be on edge, but when you get it dialed in just right, that Ferrari is an absolute joy to drive.
Did you really just say the Ferrari of Cristobal Rodriguez is a crystal ball?
I didn't mean that, but now I meant it because it's cool. Great battle here for 14th place. Francois misses the apex there in 7 just a little bit, but gets an amazing drive out. And again, the strength of the Mercedes is not in the straight line or the acceleration, contrary to its thunderous sound. Really is a car that tends to do better on the tight twisties.
Paul Gibson hits pit lane from 5th on the track. He is currently getting some service done. Chad Griffith also on pit lane in his BMW. He was a very, very quiet 9th place, but was having a killer run up from 22nd when he pit in 9th place, just in front of DJ Alessandrini. So I think we're finally cracking the top on those pit stops as, again, Elias Roman is the third of our drivers to come to the pit lane after a long vacancy there.
Up front, it's a 2-second lead. Paul Darling has been reeling in LaRose the last couple laps. And again, these McLarens can be pretty thirsty beasts. Up over the crest, and pit lane for the race leader. And Alex LaRose comes on down, and I think our questions will be answered as to where ALESSANDRINI will end up in relation to LaRose. 41 seconds is what DJ spent between the yellow cone and the green cone. In the background, there's LAYTON also coming. HOUSEAL will stay out and try to run a couple hot laps if he's got any fuel left. So where is ALESSANDRINI on the backstretch? This is going to be the big moment here, Tom, if DJ can get back out in front of LaRose, or if Alex will leapfrog him here in the pits.
Well, the margin between the two at pit entrance was 38 seconds, and we know ALESSANDRINI sat still for 41 seconds, and the McLaren might be a little more fuel thirsty than the Audi. So I don't think this is going to pan out super well for LaRose. He's still sitting there, ALESSANDRINI on the front straight.
See DJ in the background there in the Audi. Here comes LaRose releasing, but he's got to get that car up to speed and through turn one. He's not going to do it, I don't think.
Oh, he's still within touch, though. That was well played.
Wow.
LaRose is completely and perfectly in touch.
The gap will basically stay exactly what it was prior to the stop. Maybe a couple tenths more, but did a great job, all things considered. But now he's got to find pace right out of the gate, and DJ's going to take this lap to try to run because his tires are already warmed up. LaRose was faster than ALESSANDRINI on raw pace prior to the pit stop. After DJ had pit, we'll see if that pace continues for the 26 or if he'll fall in and run low 19s like DJ is at the moment.
At this point, both of these cars will continue to get faster. The problem for both of these drivers will be lap traffic when they come in. As Paul Darling pits from the lead, he will be one of our final contenders as Ken HOUSEAL from behind. In the teal Lamborghini. Matt Waldbaum, Andrew PALLOTTA, the last cars to have not pit in the top 10. I suspect we'll see them come through next. Waldbaum in the yellow Audi, PALLOTTA in the white Ford.
So LaRose back 7/10 now as we come up over the crest. That is the gap to what will maybe cycle to the lead. Paul Darling should release here as well, but I think he's going to be behind the two that have already made their stops. Here comes DJ on the bottom of your screen.
It's going to be close. Paul Darling is in a really good position.
He's going to get the lead away.
Wow.
That was amazing. Now, the question is, did he fuel enough? He spent 3 less seconds on pit road.
He must have cut that very, very closely, or potentially even thought to fuel save early on in this race, but he ran by himself for a while. This car started in 6th position at the green flag and is now leading the race after the pit stops. 16 laps to go, but he's in traffic.
Heavy traffic. There's a lot of work to do now to get by everybody else. Jukes to the right. In front of him, I believe that's the 56 car, Peter Lausen. Paul better run because I think the two behind him are a hair quicker on raw pace, so I don't think he's got a lot of time to fritz around here with other drivers. Whoa, tried to go to the right, and the car got out of the way. He almost ran into the back of him there.
If you think Paul's a hair slower than the other two, it is only a hair because the 3 fastest laps are within the same 10th for all 3 drivers. So they're, as far as I'm concerned, tied for how quickly they can drive. It's all down to consistency. Paul Darling has just slightly enough lead. Allows it in the background and hits the wall, but our leaders are safe. I think Darling has just enough lead to not really deal with the draft problem from ALESSANDRINI, but he's got to deal with these lap traffic.
Now, Alex LaRose might be licking his lips a little bit here because he might know that Darling is a little bit slower than DJ, and that means that's a good thing for LaRose because DJ will have to fight Paul for this lead. He's not that much slower, so that could bring LaRose back into the mix. I predict a 3-car battle at the end here.
This is a gift for Darling. He got down through the lap traffic down the front straightaway, and ALESSANDRINI is stuck through one of the twistiest sections of this track. There's no hope for him to pass this car until this corner exit right here. He's going to have to set up and get a run. All the meanwhile, Paul Darling is flat out. Look at him pulling away at 1.4 seconds now for the orange McLaren in the lead. That's really painful for ALESSANDRINI to deal with.
It's a pretty big gap. It's going to all have to be sorted out within the next 15 laps. Francois Brou is the last driver to make his pit stop. So we are done, at least for the drivers that are on in the front sequence. We are done pitting for the day. That's one of our keys to the race, is hitting the pits. And for Paul Darling, hitting the pits, got him out front. Now can he maintain that to the end? That's the question. Other battles happening in the background. Here's Chad Griffith and Hendrik de Zwart battling through turn number 3, 2 BMW M4 GT3s. And the Ferrari up the road, I believe that's it's not a car for position.
From 22nd and 25th. at the green flag, these pair of BMWs, so they're having a good day as well. Ken HOUSEAL was able to leapfrog Paul Gibson on the pit cycle, so he's up to 5th in that Lamborghini. Thomas LAYTON is 4th in his BMW, but he is well out of touch from the lead trio. He's 8 seconds back from LaRose, 10 from the lead. There they are, both in the same frame, all 3 of those cars running in nice formation. So the battle for 4th isn't done yet either.
Elias Roman had some hardware issues. He is done for the day, unfortunately, after a solid climb up into the top 15. He will not finish this one out. That is a real shame. Don't get tire failures or anything of the sort here in iRacing, but you certainly get hardware issues regardless. And your random, that's one reason why a lot of people don't want tire failures here in iRacing, random tire failures, because you get enough randomness with hardware and stuff not working anyway.
I mean, this is just me, but I tend to believe that sim racing should be all the best parts of racing with none of the bad parts. The bad parts of racing are random failures and damage and all that stuff. So if
and
we
losing.
and losing. But, you know, if we can keep the most fun parts and leave out the less fun parts,
everyone
great.
Wins all the time.
Yeah, I want a trophy. I'm a millennial. I'm just kidding. Unfortunately, Kevin Zhu and Jameson Huffman both disconnecting as well. So that's 3 cars that we were keeping tabs on, all having issues throughout the last 10 minutes or so.
Here's Ken HOUSEAL closing on LAYTON. This will be for 4th. HOUSEAL's actually found a lot of pace, was half a second quicker than the race leader last time by. So was DJ Alessandrini, and took that lead down to sub 1 second again for the first time since that hold up in the S's.
Well, we predicted it. HOUSEAL on the learning curve in this Lamborghini coming into the night, but seems to have found his footing, and he's certainly hounding Thomas LAYTON as they're coming up on Cristobal Rodriguez into the twisty section of the track that we saw DJ struggle to deal with. The blue Ferrari is going to be in the way for at least another couple corners. Runs wide. No, actually, they're going to clear him pretty comfortably.
Dodge the cone there. You don't want to get one of those stuck up underneath the splitter. It's not fun to have that situation. Paul Gibson hoping that the battle for 4th will bring him back into the mix, and Zwart and Griffith trade spots for 14th. I don't think they're done sorting this out just yet either. .8 of a second separate the front runners. Next time by will be 12 laps to go here, Tom. Predictions. Who wins this thing? Is it too early?
It's too early overall, but I think if Darling doesn't have any major slip-ups, Alessandrini might just barely get there. I don't know. Paul is so good at leading. When Paul's in the lead, he's so good at commanding a race. We've seen it so many times here on Sim TV, but Alessandrini's also scrappy, so I think if he gets an opportunity to try to make it work, he often does make it work.
On board here, 0.6 of a second. He's been quicker the last 3 laps. Beginning to run down that 155. And he's so strong from turn 1 down to turn 6. That's really where this Audi seems to just crush the McLaren competition.
Oh, Paul almost lost it. Big tank slapper through turn 4. He lost a bunch of time. Alessandrini is there now. And that was a big moment on the curb. Leaving turn 3, the car didn't land just right, and he chased it all the way through turn 4. That was a good save, but the gap that I mentioned Darling needed to maintain is gone.
Effectively gone, as that draft now should bring DJ the rest of the way there. But now can you complete that pass? DJ's not afraid to try it anywhere on the racetrack, but he'll probably try it first at 10A. And he's following in the draft here, and I don't think Paul's even going to bother trying to break it. Just going to waste your own time down the straightaway. Still some traffic up ahead that could make a wild card here. I think that's Dave Fitzgerald. DJ on the brakes, so much better than Darling on the brakes into 10A. Going to try to cross him up here at the exit. A little bit behind. Darling goes way right on the exit. Was that loose or trying to go defensive?
I think it might have been a little bit loose, and perhaps that McLaren is falling off of its prime here at this stage of the race. So it's going to be Dave Fitzgerald's the next lap car, and then Andrew KESSEL, I think, in another Ferrari. We're going to have to deal with those cars. Probably not until maybe at earliest the back straight, so they've got a little bit of a clean run now. The best hope, I think, for Darling is to maybe use those traffic cars as a pick for Alessandrini and gain that gap back.
And don't count out Alex LaRose. He's sitting in the background waiting for anything to happen here. Big wiggle by Alessandrini through turn 5. Here comes LaRose with a big run. Going to go to the right. Door opens. He's going to smash through it. Here he comes for second. Oh, going to get squeezed. Woo, that was tight. And LaRose will wrestle away second place from Alessandrini. And that's all Paul Darling wanted to see. He's going to extend that lead right back up to over a second again.
Big smile on his face, and now Alessandrini only has the draft from LaRose. The battle for 4th is also as hot as ever. Ken HOUSEAL is right on the back bumper of Thomas Layton in the BMW. The top running BMW gets loose off of the turn 7. A bad run, and this is a great opportunity for HOUSEAL to capitalize.
He's licking his lips now. Here he comes. In the draft, this Lamborghini much sleeker. A little bit more slippery in the wind, and he's going to have a look out to, let's see what side he goes for. I'd expect driver's right, and he's going to take it. I actually like driver's right better through 10A, 10B. I think it gives you a better run, and he's going to go around the long way and should be able to take this spot away, and he does.
Really chucks it in
no,
there.
he doesn't.
Layton with the momentum around the outside, and now all of a sudden, Paul Gibson's going to have a run at the inside. Doesn't have anywhere to go with it. Lifts back out. HOUSEAL picks up the position.
Wow, that was really dramatic. I didn't think he was going to do it, but a little slow at the exit at 12. And Layton's going to have another run. I don't think he's going to go for it here, though. Has a look. But doesn't feel confident driving up the inside that deep into a corner. LaRose trying to run Paul Darling back down at the front of the field, and Alessandrini has a bit of a reset. Oh, he's off. He's off big time at the exit of 5. Gathers it back up, but that might be his chance to win gone unless the front two have some dramas.
Certainly the final nail in the coffin at this point. We saw the Audi be so ragged early on, and we mentioned that he was certainly pushing the hardest of everybody around him, and I think it's finally starting to show. You can only drive the car on the limit for so long. He was really putting in qualifying effort, but the battle for 4th is back. Layton really trying to do anything he can at turn 7. The BMW is not good off of turn 7, but it is super fast down this back straightaway, and I think he's well within touch. Look at him come.
Oh, man, that thing is an absolute rocket ship. Here he comes to the left. HOUSEAL looks like he's driving a lawnmower, not a Lamborghini. Into the braking zone for 10A, and Paul Gibson waiting in the wings for these two to go side by side again so he can take advantage.
Carbon copy of last lap, but Layton is too deep this time. He goes a little bit over. HOUSEAL sets up for the under and gets it with a big run up the inside and will maintain the point. Gibson lifts again. This is interesting. The McLaren is not seeming super aggressive.
It's great stuff here for 4th spot. Closing in again is LaRose on Darling for the lead. Here's Layton up the inside for turn 1, backs out again.
We've seen from the GT4 championship that Thomas Layton is spectacular in the later stages of a race. He actually protected and raced his heart out, I think, at Suzuka in the BMW M4 GT4. He's now in the GT3 car and is trying everything he can to get by Ken HOUSEAL, but I think on raw pace, HOUSEAL's probably a little bit quicker, but the BMW, I think, is maybe a little bit of a better car for Road Atlanta.
Yeah, he botched turn 5 there, though, and that's going to let Paul Gibson get up alongside him. And that might be a big enough distraction. Look at the size difference between those two cars. It's like a Silverado compared to a Mini Cooper in a parking lot, and looks like Gibson will not be able to take advantage of that all the way.
Smart to not force the issue too much down into turn 6 because they now have touch with Ken HOUSEAL still.
For the race lead, LaRose is there. 8 laps to go this time through 9 minutes remain.
He pulled a half second out of the lead last time through at 19.1 to a 19.5 to create that gap that he has now. But I don't know. It's hard to say. If he doesn't get a clear gap on it, I wouldn't attack too hard until the last couple of laps because they don't want to bring Alessandrini back into that. That would be a nightmare for them.
He was the quickest car of the top 3 the last time by. It wasn't by much, only a couple hundredths, but once they start battling, I think DJ is going to have one more crack at this before all things are said and done.
It's 2.4 seconds from Darling to Alessandrini. It only takes one side-by-side run through a sequence of corners to make that evaporate.
I just noticed that LaRose lost a whole bunch of time going down the hill. And that's where we noticed DJ gaining a bunch of time on LaRose earlier. I think Alex is just struggling in general with everything from turn 1 to turn 5. And then this is where Alex seems to get really, really good and beats everybody. Is really turn 6 through 10 is really where that second place McLaren comes alive. So very distinct that LaRose might be the quickest car on the track, and the last half of the track, the first half is where his struggle really comes.
Could be 2 reasons for that. The first might be a setup choice for having a lot less downforce to make sure that number 26 car is fast in a straight line. The second could just be comfort in driving style. A really on the limit kind of ragged, scrappy driving style is rewarded from the exit of turn 1 to the entry to turn 5 through those S's. If Alex is driving tighter and tighter, that will be rewarded at turn 6, 7, 10A, 10B. So if his driving style is such that he's stronger on the second half of the lap, that's not a bad place to be. That's where the passing can happen, but it is certainly seeming to hurt him early in the lap.
Jack Chrissy spun out in turn number 6. He was running up inside the top 5 earlier, had the pace to be there, but crashed earlier in turn number 5 and has never recovered completely. HOUSEAL, Layton, and Gibson still going at it for 4th. They're not done yet. The understeer for Layton through turn number 1 gives up some time to Gibson and loses some to Ken HOUSEAL's rear bumper. Coming to 6 to go. 7 minutes to go for the front runners. You just groaned.
I was looking a little bit further back. Matt Walbaum is running 7th, but had a big hairy moment with some traffic that Andrew PALLOTTA is now dealing with in that Ford. He runs 8th, so he's maintained a top 10 in what we deemed not the car not to have, really. But there is 6th and 7th, the yellow and white, running towards us in some lap traffic. But Walbaum almost had a big incident at the bottom of turn 12. That's why I groaned.
He gathered it back up. For the top spot, still LaRose within 0.3 of a second. He is so close. 6 laps to go here for Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta for the DC Region SCCA Virtual Racing League round number 2. A little wide there for Darling. Kicked up some dirt. That's sketchy.
Virtually a tie last time across the line, but both the top 2 were faster than ALESSANDRINI. So again, as long as they don't interrupt each other and start to battle, I think this will be the top 2 on this race. Darling faster through turn 3, gets the run down the hill. This is where we talked about LaRose struggling maybe a bit. You hear him lifting, managing throttle, avoiding the curbs. Darling way more willing to take risks. Look at how ragged he is down the hill, but then gets the car set up. LaRose hops to turn 5, uses less track for sure, but then comes maybe a little bit more into his own.
Keeping my eye, and I think if a pass is going to happen with LaRose, it's going to be down into 10A. And closer every time. Building a run out of this backstretch is all he has to do. Cameron Bidwell hits pit lane from 11th.
I was keeping an eye on that one because he was actually running down PALLOTTA for 8th, and he was one of the drivers that had an incident early pit and seems to have been a little bit out of the window, probably doing a splash and go.
160 miles an hour for the front runners into 10A on the brakes again. And LaRose is, if he could just get the slightest bit better run out of turn 7 or lose a little bit less time through the first half of the racetrack, he would have this spot easily, Tom. And then once you make that pass, it's hard for anybody to get it back. So he's a lot better through turn 12 that time by. And here goes Darling defensive.
Massive run out of turn 10B. You could see the time evaporating, and LaRose is maybe a little bit less experienced in this position than Paul Darling. We know that from other championships, Darling is really good at controlling the front of a race, and LaRose might not have the racecraft to figure out what to do with it, but again, like you're saying, if he could just get a little bit more of a run in that section of the track or maintain a little bit closer gap in this section of the track where he seems to lose time, look at the gap that's appeared there, and it'll be gone by the end of the back straightaway, I bet.
Yeah, I think you're right about the setup. I think LaRose is running a lot lower downforce. It just seems to be crushing him. This racetrack is 2 different tracks on one side versus the other. One half, it's just all flat out, and the more trimmed out your car is, the better. The other half, you know, prototypes will just treat the S's as a straight line, full throttle. So the closer you can get your car to a prototype, closer you can keep your car full throttle, and that's what Darling seems to be doing in comparison to LaRose, who's tiptoeing a lot more like a stock car would around here.
Unfortunately for Thomas Layton, his prototype is not treating him very well. He seems to have really dropped off pace and lost the position both to Ken HOUSEAL and Paul Gibson. He runs 6th now in his BMW and is the slowest car in the top 6.
Also coming up through 10B, you kind of get on throttle a little bit, and then you have to wait a little bit more before you can stomp on it full way. And the more confidence you have going up the hill and making that, oh, look at this, Tom, all this traffic, 4 laps to go, and it's a busy place up the road.
I wouldn't be surprised if this is the deciding factor, maybe the deciding lap for this race.
Here we go through turn 3. Cristobal Rodriguez in the blue car. 3 laps down, Darling and LaRose chasing each other down the hill. It's going to get real busy here at the bottom.
Oh, and this is so painful because you're just stuck. Again, you can't make a move until you get the runoff at turn 5. So ALESSANDRINI probably just made up at least a half a second, if not more, through that little sequence. Now they get the run up that straightaway. ALESSANDRINI is still out of touch, so that's good news for the top 2. Bad news for him. And they get a bit of a break onto that back straightaway. We'll have to see how much attention the lapped cars are paying.
That might have already put Paul Darling in a bad spot because LaRose is only half a car length back, and he's got more car on the straights. This is going to be a drag race here to turn 10. And now LaRose is going to have the advantage, I think.
That was a good exit for Paul Darling, though. Now the draft kicks in. Oh, Alex is definitely going to have an opportunity this lap. He lifts. Oh. He doesn't want it yet.
Why is that? You'd think that you'd want it. This is might have been your best opportunity coming to 3 to go. You're running out of time here, Tom.
Perhaps that's the racecraft showing. This is a driver that's newer to the wheel-to-wheel racing and newer to the iRacing service than the cars around him. That's not to say that he's not experienced. He practices the heck out of this, and he's certainly super quick, but may not have the perspective to realize that that was the best chance he's going to get unless he knows that he's got so much fuel in the tank, figuratively, that he can just motor Darling on the last lap.
Yeah, I think we have the advantage of looking at this from a top-down perspective
Yes.
and seeing the gaps and analyzing this for the entire race. But we know that Paul Darling is much faster in the first sector and much slower in the second sector. LaRose might not be even focusing on that right now. He's just in it and maybe not realizing where he's better, where he's worse. And I think if he got out front, he would be unstoppable. But he needs to get out there because already Darling is beginning to run that lead back out again.
Again, unless he knows that he's got a ton of something left, that he can easily take it when he wants it. I agree, big missed opportunity. Now the lap traffic of Dave Fitzgerald is coming into its own. It's going to give Paul Darling a draft down this straightaway. Dave's usually pretty good about pulling out of the way and not making himself a factor, but they're going to get every draft that they can for the last seconds before they finally pull up and pass him.
There's still more traffic up the road. Maybe this is why LaRose didn't want the lead. He saw all that traffic and would rather be on the attack than the defense, but I don't know if you can bank on that.
It's a big gamble for sure. They're going to be coming to the penultimate lap, 2 to go next time they cross the line.
Actually, this will be, correction, this will be white flag here, Tom. As we hit 1 minute and 4 seconds left, this will be the final lap of this race.
So probably one more. Oh, Darling, a mistake. Goes 2 off, flashes the lights of the lap traffic in front of him. But this is certainly interesting now with a surprise white flag in the air. It's not 2 to go. It's the last lap.
And they would have known this. Again, our timing and scoring can get off sometimes depending on the pace of the race, but they would have known that it's 2 laps to go. But, oh, LaRose is a little bit ragged through turn 3. That might be all she wrote there. Darling is going to try to run away.
It's a massive run down the hill. Here, LaRose still lifting at the bottom of the S's.
He's got time to breathe, though. There's traffic up ahead. They might catch him if they run up there, but now Paul's got a 7/10 of a second lead. He's got to kind of ration this here because with 25 seconds left, you don't want to go catch the field and then get yourself caught up in an incident.
The cars in front making mistakes, too. They're almost 3 wide at the apex of turn 7. It's Jack Chrissy making his way through a couple of other cars and had a bit of a awkward moment, but I don't think they're going to catch him. I think they're just going to miss catching him.
Better hope so. White flag will officially wave in 3 seconds. And there it is. Final lap here coming to the checkers. Paul Darling out front. Ran most of this race in 3rd. Came out on the pit strategy. Following the field through turns 10A and 10B. Will come up over the crest. And had it been one more lap, things might be different. But Paul Darling will come down turn number 12, and he will win round 2 of the DC Region SCCA Virtual Racing League. LaRose, Alessandrini tight in 2nd. Margin of victory, 0.3 of a second. What a battle there at the end. Kyle Herbst has had an issue. He's out on the final lap of the race, unfortunately.
Ken HOUSEAL holds on for 4th in his Lamborghini, 5th for Paul Gibson. Thomas Layton struggles in the late stages of the race, but a good run in the BMW for 6th. Matt Walbaum recovers for 7th. Andrew PALLOTTA, how about that Ford up in the top 10, 8th for him, and then same Scott. Kyle Herbst recovers for 10th as well. I think the impressive drives for me, Paul Darling from 6th on the grid to win that race on seemingly fuel strategy and pit strategy. He came out in the lead after that, completely surprised us, and then PALLOTTA just so consistent and good in that less than good car, maintains 8th.
And having a look, you know what's interesting, Tom? You know what I noticed about the top 15? Not a single Ferrari, which is interesting to me.
It is interesting. I think they definitely showed that they were having issues. Every time we saw Ferrari on camera, it almost seemed like it was because they were crashing. So this might not be the track they're for, but we know they're fast at other tracks. So we got 3 more tracks on the schedule. Perhaps those Ferraris will come into their own.
Yeah, and coming up on the schedule here in 2 weeks' time, we'll be transitioning back to our Group 1 category, which again is the MX-5s and Mustangs. That will be at Watkins Glen on March 17th. And then back here with the Group 2 cars, be the VIR full course, then Summit Point with Group 1, GT3s at Road America, Group 1 again at VIR South, then Watkins Glen Boot to finish things off at the tail end of this season. Waiting in the wings here, we've got Alex LaRose and Paul Darling. Let's talk first with Paul Darling because we'll talk with Alex LaRose first. We'll get a chat from him. Hey, Alex, you got a copy?
Hey, Kyle, what's up?
Hey, man, missed out on winning that race by 0.3 of a second. Take us through your battle there with DJ Alessandrini and then subsequently Paul Darling after he came out in front out of the pits. Was that a surprise to you? And then take us through that run to the end.
Yeah, so right at the start of the race, I didn't want DJ behind me because I know the McLaren's much worse on fuel and tires. So if I could get behind him and tag along with him and follow him through, that would have been beneficial for me. I think unfortunately he made an early mistake that put me in front of him for a little while. And then he pitted early. So didn't go according to plan necessarily. And I was very surprised to see Paul come out in front of both of us on the pit strategy. I suspected maybe he wouldn't finish with enough fuel, but apparently I took way too much. So
it seemed like both Alessandrini and Paul Darling would gain a bunch of time on you through the S's, then you'd run them all back down into turn 10A. With a couple laps to go, you had a run on Paul Darling, you lifted. Tell us why.
Yeah, the tires just weren't there. I knew Paul was going to defend, and I didn't want to risk taking him out. I knew he'd probably beat me on the brakes, so I figured take the second place rather than, take out the leader of the race. A little bit conservative. Maybe next race I'll be a little bit more ballsy. But.
All right, Alex LaRose, second place tonight. Hey, Alex, congratulations. A strong run. Started first, finished second. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks.
Move on now to DJ Alessandrini, who finished this race in third, led the first stint of the race, and came to pit lane, came back out right in front of Alex LaRose. DJ, then things started kind of shifting around a little bit. Take us through your afternoon.
Yeah, the rear tires just became really unhappy, and I'm still figuring out this car, but it seems like a switch is flipped, and all of a sudden you better adjust to it like right away. And it took me a couple laps to adjust to that. And once I adjusted to it, I was running about the same pace as Alex and Paul, but it just took me too many laps to figure out the light switch of the tires just falling off. Yeah, my rear tires were at mid 60 percentiles of wear toward the end of that race, and I mean at Bathurst we were double stinting the car, and that's about the wear we'd have when we came in. So Road Atlanta pretty brutal on tires, as it turns out, and I had fun, and I mean Alex and Paul had great pace, and just some unlucky lap traffic for me that kind of made me push too hard right when that switch was getting flipped. And then, but it was returned with the unlucky traffic, but they didn't make mistakes and I did, so that's why they won.
DJ Alessandrini, third place tonight after starting in second. DJ, congrats. We'll see you in a couple weeks for Group 1.
Yep, thanks guys.
Paul Darling got it done today, finished in first after starting in sixth, and it all came down to some clever pit strategy. Paul, how'd you get yourself out in front, and how'd you hang on to it with all the traffic there at the end?
Honestly, I'm not quite sure. I was just happy to be on the same zip code as them with how much prep I had for this one. But I'm honestly not sure where the delta came from. I know I cut the fuel really tight. I only had like half a lap of fuel left over coming back over the line, but that's I'm very surprised at that.
This McLaren today seemed like it was really, really strong for you and Alex, but Alessandrini was in the Audi. You didn't really get a chance to battle with them a whole lot, but coming down to the last few laps, there was a lot of traffic in there. Take us through your thoughts as you see all that traffic and how you were trying to gauge it to keep your lead over those second and third place cars.
I'm sure you saw, I think it was like 5 or 6 minutes to go, caught traffic going into turn 1, and once you're stuck behind them, there's really nowhere for them to go until you get out of the bottom of the S's, which is a massive chunk of time. It's pretty hairy trying to come out of those S's with pace, because the lap traffic can be a little bit unpredictable there. Not sure if they're going to spin in front of you or not, but it's really tough, and just got to be patient sometimes.
And then take us through, Alex LaRose had a run on you into 10A, and he lifted. Were you surprised by that, and how prepared were you to deal with him on the outside through 10A?
I was very surprised. He had excellent pace all day today. It was really impressive, the lap times he was putting down. I'm very surprised he didn't go around the outside, but it might be just working on the racecraft aspect. But I think he would have had a very good opportunity there if he went for it.
Paul Darling, 6th to 1st, wins DC Region round number 2, Group 2 at Road Atlanta. Hey, Paul, thanks for talking. We'll see you next time. All right, Tom, wrapping things up here from Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta. A wild one, a lot of action today. There was certainly no shortage of stuff to keep an eye on. But at the end of the day, Paul Darling got it done all with strategy. The interesting note, you're smiling. What you got on your mind?
It's just Paul is to me like the award show Taylor Swift of iRacing. Just surprised and happy to be there. But he put on a show tonight, nailed it. I also think it's really interesting. The drivers to be eligible for the championship have to stay with the same car for the entire 4 rounds of Group 2, which means VIR, Road America, Watkins Glen, and what we saw tonight. The implications of the car they picked to be eligible for the championship matters everywhere. So we talked about the Ferrari maybe not great here. We know the Ferrari is killer at VIR, so this is going to be very fun to watch play out. But Darling adds to the 3 different championships. Now it's Bidwell, Huffman, and Darling at the top of each one.
An amazing race here from Road Atlanta. We'll be back with you in 2 weeks for group number 1. And that will be a trip out to Watkins Glen on March 17th. Next up on SimTV tomorrow night will be Scar's Super Trofeo, the makeup race from Mid-Ohio. Andrew Cardinale will be bringing that with you for you with Finian DeCuna. Then we'll also be streaming the Porsche Esports Sprint Challenge Canada from Nürburgring tomorrow night. Multi-class action there. We'll meet you at 8 p.m. Eastern over on the Porsche Twitch channel. And then we'll be off for the weekend. We'll be back with you on the following Tuesday with more Grid Life action as well as Fuel Premier Series action from Sonoma. Nope, 2 weeks from now it'll be nowhere. Off week.
It'll be Nashtona Sonoma.
Nashtona Sonoma. All right, that's it for us from SimTV here tonight. Kyle Heyer alongside Tom O'Gorman. We'll see you tomorrow for Porsche Canada.